What was early childhood like?
I always tell people I didn't want or need for anything. I grew up in a nice suburban community, Grandview Heights in Ohio. I will say this, disclaimer. Mom was alcoholic. She passed away from an overdose.
I'm sorry for your loss, dude.
4 years ago. My sister is in recovery, same as me, fighting addiction. My mother's dad, so my grandfather, died of cirrhosis of the liver. So, it's safe to say that this shit runs deep in my blood.
Yeah.
I didn't know that as a kid. So, childhood was normal, man. My dad raised me great, white picket fence life. And I didn't really struggle.
Did you have siblings?
Yeah, I have a sister.
Is she
younger sister, currently in recovery? It's funny, she's actually in the same drug court program that I was in when I first got sober. So, and then the cool thing about that is, I reached out to my judge to try and get her help when she got arrested, and he helped her and got her in that program as opposed to prison or regular probation.
That's great.
I made him an ally instead of an enemy.
Of course, of course. I mean, I feel like so many people, repeat offenders or lie to the judge. When you're honest to a judge and you do the actual plan that they put forth, I interviewed JD DeLay a couple of weeks ago, and he failed and failed and failed and kept saying, "Oh yeah, judge, I won't do that again." And then he created an enemy with the judge, and then he begged, and he had enough. He hit a rock bottom. He had enough, and this was the time he got sober this time, and he pled for one more chance at recovery, and the judge gave him that one opportunity, and he got sober finally, and now he has a friend in that judge. So
people forget that judges, probation officers, people in the justice system, they have a job to do, and that job is not just putting you in prison. So, for instance, probation officers, everybody, my judge, my probation officer. But if you actually wanted to get your shit together, right, and went to your probation officer and said, "Hey, man, I'd like to get into therapy. Can you help me with that? Hey, man, what jobs hire felons? Can you help me with that?" If people actually made them do their job because their job is to help rehabilitate you, things would be a lot different. But instead, people make them enemies, and that doesn't normally go very well.
That's interesting you say that, because a lot of people say the system doesn't work. There's no rehabilitation. Now, listen, that could be right.
I think it is right on some levels, but I think that we're trending in the right direction. I say that because I spent some time working in corrections after I got out of jail. We'll get into that, but there's a lot of good things happening. And of course, I can only speak for Ohio and Franklin County, but I think there's a lot of good changes happening, and we're trending in the right direction with addicts and alcoholics.
As you grew up, what was middle school, high school like for you? And did you have a grip on your identity?
So middle school, normal shit, anxiety, wanting to fit in, wanting to belong. That's the big thing for me is I always felt like I didn't belong. And I think we hear that a lot with alcoholics. I always tell people DARE was the first education or information I got about drugs and alcohol. And after DARE, I took away a couple things. I was under the impression that if I used drugs or abused alcohol, it was going to ruin my life, right? Just say no. If I do these things, it's going to ruin my life. But the big thing is I thought there would be immediate consequences. So I was under the impression as a kid that if I went out to a party and drank some beers and smoked some weed, when I wake up the next day, things are going to burn to the ground. And that's obviously not how it works. But I didn't know that as a kid. And you fast forward to 8th grade, that transition into high school, obviously tumultuous. I was playing football in middle school. You see me, I'm tall, but I'm not a very big guy. And, I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be popular, all those things that you want as a kid. And my freshman year of high school was very normal. I didn't pick up a drink or a drug. I made honor roll. It was the only time I made honor roll, but you can never take that from me. It's mine forever. And, I had a normal freshman year. I didn't pick up a drink or a drug until sophomore year. So 16.
What was that like the first time?
It was awesome. Anybody in my opinion, that did the things that I did that tells you they didn't have a good time at some point is lying. I always hear like, oh, my worst day or my best day sober is better than my best day drinking, or what's the saying? My worst.
It's bullshit.
Like,
it's bullshit.
It's not true.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a lot of good times early on.
Yeah.
The first time I drank and smoked weed, it was Thanksgiving break, sophomore year. And, I grew up, Grandview's really small. So my graduating class was 96 kids, and we grew up K through 12. So, you're friends with these kids your entire life. Mm-hmm. And I started to watch my friends go out to parties, and they'd come back to school and everything was fine. So I was under the impression that I was lied to. Like, what do you mean? I'm watching some of my best friends in life go out to parties, come back to school Monday, and everything's fine. There's no consequences. So eventually I was like, all right, let me check this out. And I went and drank that night. I had some beers, I smoked some weed, and the whole world opened up to me, man. I could talk to girls. I was funnier. I fit in all of a sudden. You go back to school Monday and everyone's like, hey, Lewis, that party was fucking awesome. I was like, oh my God, this is it.
Yep.
This is what I'm missing. But I still had that like dare thing in the back of my head. And I was like, all right, like I'll take it easy. I'll do this once a month. And it didn't stay that way for very long at all.
It's interesting because when people talk about fitting in and being a part of, and I also, like yourself, never felt a part of. The Monday morning when you come back from the weekend in high school, mm-hmm. and everyone's like, bro, yep. like fucking crazy, like that party was sick. And when you're involved in that conversation, there's a high to it.
Yeah.
There's a high to that.
Absolutely.
So, like, it's not like just a part of, like, oh, they're in a circle smoking weed. Physically, I want to be in there with them smoking weed, so I feel... No, it was, like, much more than that.
100%.
Like, I'm cool. I'm part of that. And I was involved in that.
I think that's, what people want in general.
Yep.
And I thought I had found it in drugs and alcohol. High school was a lot of fun. I loved high school. I started, like I said, I picked up my first drink and drug when I was 16. Junior year, okay, now I'm taking some Adderall. Maybe someone's got a couple Vicodin, mushrooms, LSD. I'm dabbling in all of these things. By my senior year, I was a fucking professional alcoholic addict. I didn't know it at the time, but looking back on it, I was a pro. And I learned that in a suburban community. A lot of people think that shit like that doesn't happen in nicer communities. It does. People just hide it. They're ashamed. They're afraid that other parents in the community are going to look down on them or whatever the case may be. So yeah, my senior year, I'm smoking daily. We had open lunch at Grandview, which was fucking great. So we could leave for an hour, and all like the normal kids would go to like McDonald's and Wendy's, and I'd go like rip shots and fucking smoke or do lines of Adderall, mm-hmm. Which was great for me. I started selling some drugs, and I want you to know, because I hear this shit all the time. I was not some fucking massive dope boy. All right, for the record. I mean, how many times have you been to jail or been around people? They're like, yeah, man, I move bricks, da-da-da.
Yeah.
People lie about that shit all the time.
Yeah.
It's silly.
Yeah.
I was not that guy. I did fairly well. And the whole thing with selling drugs was like, well, then I can get my shit free. That's how it started. But the other thing I found, to your point, I loved when my phone would ring and someone needed me. That feeling was almost better than the money. Like people blowing up my phone. Hey, can you come meet me? Hey, can you come meet me? I loved that. I loved the way that felt. When it came time to go to college, so Grandview is a really high performing school district. And there is a lot of pressure and expectation around college. And, I was under the impression that I was supposed to go to school, get a degree, have a career, buy a house, have kids, have a, the perfect fucking existence. And so I was like, all right, I'll go to school, but I didn't know what the fuck I was going to do. I didn't really have a plan. I didn't really even know who I was. So I went to Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, and it is known for their Halloween party. That's the reason I applied to that school, because they were a party school. It was the only school I applied to. I went for computer science. I went for computer science because I liked video games and building computers and shit. So I didn't know what the fuck I was doing, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And I graduated high school in 2009. I'm using daily, and I went that summer after I graduated to go re-up. And my dude was like, hey, can you move these? And he handed me a bunch of Oxy 80s. And and I was like, yeah, probably. So I took them home, and I was like, well, I got to see what the fuck this is before I sell it.
Oh.
I got to understand what I'm selling here. And I tried it, and
you took it?
I snorted some. Yeah,
Okay.
I snorted some of an 80, and it was perfect, man. It was, I was like, this is it. This is what I'm going to do. And I started using Oxycontin every day after that.
Did you get sick initially the first time or no? Did
Like
you
nauseous?
Did you throw up
No,
at all?
I remember a couple times I would nod out, but I never got sick. I know it's common with opiates.
It is scary how powerful those pills were.
Yeah.
What year was this? 2009?
2009, yeah.
2009. It was the height of Purdue Pharma, Oxycontin, pill mills down in Florida, doctor shopping. In 2009, I was doctor shopping.
Yep.
And I mean, those things were so powerful. It activated a lot of addictions.
Yeah,
People
dude,
had the addiction gene already, and then it just activated them. And I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I did an Oxy, it was like a warm blanket, and it gave me energy. I could do anything.
Mm-hmm.
I would eventually come down and nod out, but I hear you, man. You had arrived.
Yeah, it was incredible. There's no hangover. And yeah, dude, I started selling the pills and doing pills every day. And I didn't really know as a kid, as an 18-year-old, what I was doing. You got to remember, I hadn't had consequences up to that point. I was still going to college. I played sports in high school. And so I was just like, all right, cool. It's just another drug that I enjoy, and I'm gonna use it. And so I went down to OU, and I didn't last very long. And it wasn't really because of the partying and the drugs. Certainly that didn't help, but it was more like an internal thing. I remember the second quarter, they were quarterly back then. I called my dad, and I was just fucking bawling my eyes out. And I told him, I was like, I can't do this, because when I got down to Athens, I wasn't the big man anymore. In Grandview, I was somebody. I was the plug. I was fucking, I was popular. And I got down there, and all that fucking shit came back. All those feelings came back. And I couldn't do it, man. I could not do it, and I dropped out. I moved back to Columbus, and I always tell people it's so unfortunate. And I spoke in the middle school, the Grandview Middle School Tuesday. And I always stress to those kids, I speak to the 8th graders, like, you guys are lucky to grow up in this community and have the opportunities and the privilege that you have, because there's a lot of people out there that don't fucking have it. And, I had the opportunity to go to college, and I pissed it away. I dropped out. So I came back home to Columbus. I moved in with my girlfriend at the time, and I got a job at a burger place, and I was just going to sell drugs. And the job was really...
a front.
Yeah, just to have a job. So I could be like, yeah, Dad, I'm working. I might not be college material, but I'm working. And, that was my grand fucking plan. Around 2000, I want to say 2011 is when Purdue changed the formula to Oxycontin.
To OP.
Yes. So it was 2011, 2012. I remember my dealer, everybody freaking out, like, oh, this is going to happen. But we didn't know if it was true. And when it happened, and certainly you probably remember it too, shit got crazy. The price.
Did you try to freeze it? Did you hear about the
OPs?
myth?
Yeah, the microwave and
you can microwave it, you could
yeah.
freeze it. Supposedly, it
I tried all that
separates.
shit. Yeah. None of it really worked. It was never the same. And like the price of pills went through the fucking roof. And heroin hit the streets. So at this time, I knew I was physically dependent on the drug. I needed to take it every day. And I went to work one day and I didn't have any pills and I was sick. So I'm standing over this fucking grill, flipping burgers, dope sick. And for people who don't know what that's like, I mean, it's like the worst flu you've ever had, combined with terrible anxiety and depression and a bunch of terrible mental symptoms. And, everybody, five guys at the burger place I worked knew what I did. And my buddy there was like, hey, man, I can get you something that'll take care of you. I'm like, oh, please, God, whatever. Yes, I'm sick. And I got a bag of heroin for the first time. And it was a freebie, which was so generous of that dealer, by the way.
So generous.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
Such a good guy.
Just a taste.
Yeah, so fantastic. So I used heroin for the first time at work. On the clock, I locked myself in the bathroom and snorted a line off the baby changing station. And I mean, if that doesn't give you an idea of the total disregard I had for my life at that point, I don't think anything will, because normal people don't grab a bag of heroin at work and try it for the first time at work on the clock in the fucking bathroom. Like, it's not normal.
On a baby table.
Yeah. I mean, it's fucking crazy. And after that, man, my life spiraled very, very quickly. I lost the girlfriend. I lost the job. I couldn't keep $1 in my pocket. I was unemployable. I was a train wreck, and I moved back home with mom and dad. I had no friends. Any of my buddies who hung out with me from high school didn't want to hang out with me anymore. I wasn't fun. The partying wasn't cool. And I had nobody. And, I mentioned to you that my mother died of an overdose. And, I started getting high with mom. And, I share that semi-regularly. And, when I'm speaking or telling my story somewhere in a room of people and I share that, I look around and there's people who nod their head and they get it and they've been there, and there's people who are disgusted that I would do something like that with my mother. But it's a part of my story, man. It's a part of my story. And I had nobody, and she became my running buddy. She became my partner in crime.
When you did heroin for the first time at work, did you even stop for a second and say, I'm making the jump to heroin? Or was it just like reaction because your detox, or you started detoxing,
Yeah.
so the pain was just so great?
Yeah, it was just more of a please make this feeling go away kind of thing.
And you were willing to do whatever it took.
Yeah.
That's wild, dude.
Yeah. And you got to think too, like, it was cheaper. So I was like, cool, I'll just switch to this. It'll save me money. I could probably manage it better. Obviously that's not the case. And after I moved back home with mom and dad, mom and I are getting high together. And eventually I would get into committing crimes. Now, prior to that, I had a buddy that I got high with, and he'd gotten sober. He had 6 months sober. And he said, hey, man, come with me to this recovery meeting and hear this guy speak and tell his story. Don't know why I went, but I did. I was still in active addiction. So I listened to this guy speak, and I go up to him afterwards, and, I'm like, hey, man, thank you for sharing your story. It's fantastic. But there's a difference between you and I, because I always looked for differences, so I could say, I'm not like you. I'm smarter than you. I didn't look for similarities.
And you could peace out. Never go back.
Yeah. And I told him, I said, hey man, there's a major difference. You've been in legal trouble and I haven't. And he said, keep doing what you're doing and, it'll come. And I walked out of that room thinking, he was one of the biggest morons I've ever met. And that's because my ego was massive. And I'm thinking, he doesn't know who the fuck I am. You don't know me. I'm smarter than you, buddy. I'm not going to get arrested. what the fuck, you know? You did it wrong, whatever. And 6 months later, I found myself in the back of a cop car for the first time. The first time I got arrested, it was for a misdemeanor eluding charge. So I was lit up by the police, local police. I drove like 3 blocks. They arrested me, took me down to the county jail. It was a misdemeanor. It's my first charge. So on the way down there, I'm kind of talking shit to the cop. I'm like, hey, man, like, because him and I knew each other. I was like, hey, man, I'm getting out tomorrow, so this isn't a big deal. I'm kind of talking shit, whatever. They book me in, and they go through my clothes. And I had a bag of heroin in my coat that they found when I was being booked in. So that immediately turned into a felony 5 possession and a felony 3 conveyance charge. And I'll never forget, he pulled that bag of dope out and he kind of like waved it in front of my face. And he goes, that's 2 felonies right there. And my heart just dropped to my stomach because I thought my life was over. And also, man, like I grew up in a nice neighborhood. So going to the county jail was a huge culture shock for me. Massive culture shock. Those felonies were dismissed for future indictment. They had to test it. And I, got out, I bonded out on the misdemeanor and right back to ripping and running. After that, dude, it was just in and out of jail constantly. I'd do a month, I'd do a week, I'd do 2 weeks, I'd do whatever. I was shoplifting. I always tried to keep my crimes at the misdemeanor level as much as I could. And yeah, dude, I was just fucking in and out of jail, and it became normal. And, once you understand how jail works, the etiquette, the code, I was like, all right, I can deal with this once in a while. Bad. Yeah. And that's a crazy thought, to even think that I got so used to it that it became normal going to jail. Again, normal people don't fucking do that. Normal people don't think that way. I'm sick in the head, And eventually I would switch to IV drug use. My dad was diabetic, so I had clean needles just ready to go. And, my life was a complete and utter fucking train wreck. Around 2013, 2014, my dad sold the house in Grandview, the nice neighborhood, and we moved out to the west side of Columbus, which is a little rough around the edges. Mm-hmm. I'm still doing the same bullshit. And I remember there was one night specifically that I'll tell you about a good night for Lewis and addiction, and you can probably relate to this. Mm. So a good night for Lewis and addiction, a hotel, like a shitty hotel, like a Days Inn, or
we're going out tonight.
Yeah, we're going to some shitty hotel.
Bougie.
If I had a full pack of cigarettes, great. I had some heroin and some crack. It didn't fucking matter at the time. You know what I mean? I would. Yeah, it didn't fucking matter as long as I had some cigarettes. Drugs of choice: heroin, crack cocaine, and some extra money for like a McDouble. That's a good night. That's a really good night for Lewis. But I wanted to make it better. So I was with my mom and my buddy. We're getting high in this hotel, which sounds fucking crazy, by the way. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go get some snacks. So I get in the car, and I brought my drugs with me because I knew if I left them, they would take them.
Oh my God.
And I go to the grocery store, and I buy a box of Cinnamon Toast Crunch. It's the last thing I remember. I woke up in the hospital the next day. I didn't know how the fuck I got there. I didn't know what happened. But I had overdosed. And they found me in the middle of an intersection, passed out behind the wheel. I also received 2 more felony charges because of that, because I had the heroin and the crack on me. I got a DUI. I was put on probation for the DUI. And again, the 2 felonies were dismissed for future indictment. It was the first time I had to do probation. I failed the first drug test, didn't go back. I went in there knowing I was going to fail and didn't go back. And at that point, Dad had fucking had enough, and he kicked me out of the house. He should have done it much sooner. What my mom, my sister, and I put my dad through was fucking terrible. He was such a good man, and he worked so hard. I feel really bad about what we put him through. But he kicked me out, and that's what I fucking needed, because I'm the type of addict, I don't stop. You have to put me in handcuffs. You got to take me away. I never went to treatment. There was one time a bed became available for treatment. They called me. They're like, hey, Mr. Essig, we have a bed. I was like, click.
Yep.
Fuck no. I was not willing to do anything to change. And so I found myself homeless. I always tell people, man, there was something that was really freeing about being homeless. It sounds ridiculous, but I had no responsibilities. I didn't have to answer to anybody. I was passively suicidal. So what I mean by that is if I got like hit by a car or shot or I overdosed, cool. I'm good with that. But I was too much of a coward to do it myself.
Take your own life.
I couldn't do it. I was too much of a coward. I couldn't pull the trigger. And so I was in this place, man, where I was totally off the grid. And there was some kind of like weird freedom in that. But I think that's because I just didn't give a fuck about my life or myself. I was homeless for about a month. I remember that first night I went to this church down the street, and I did that because I'm a manipulator and I know that people at churches are really nice and they'll feed me and they'll give me clothes, maybe give me some money. And they did. They gave me some clothes and a sleeping bag, and I went into the woods. I laid my sleeping bag down that night, went to bed. I woke up 2-3 in the morning, and it was pouring down rain. And I didn't have anything to like cover me. I didn't have a tent. I pulled the sleeping bag over my head, and I just remember thinking, like, how did you end up here? Right? The math didn't add up because I had everything growing up. I had everything. I had every opportunity, every privilege. And there I was, strung out in a sleeping bag with nothing, homeless, in the woods. And I didn't understand how the fuck I got there. I didn't wake up one day and say, I'm going to be a junkie when I grow up. Nobody does that. Wasn't in the playbook. But there I was. And so I was homeless for about a month before my felony indictments came back, all 4 of them. So I had warrants out for my arrest, and the marshals eventually picked me up for those, and back to jail I went.
So they came back with the original bag of heroin in your coat, and then from your overdose. So all 4 came in at once, and then they came out, they found you. Yep. It is absolutely. I'm glad that you shined a light on. You were sleeping in the woods, and just like that, it happened that quick. Mm-hmm. And you're sitting there saying to yourself, how did I end up here? Yep. Now, what for you in your head at that time, what are you telling yourself? Like, I just need this to get my life together. You said you were passively suicidal. Mm-hmm. But were you even interested in potentially going to another meeting?
Yeah,
rehab?
So I think I wanted to get clean, but I didn't know how. And I just wasn't willing to take that step, on my own. I needed a kick in the ass. I historically, I do best when I'm backed into a corner.
Yeah.
I always talk about pain being a huge motivator. I find myself, for instance, if I find myself kind of depressed, right, or things are not going well, once things get really bad is when I make a change, right? Once there's enough pain, then I make a change and I do something about it. And so I got picked up by the marshals, not the last time I went to jail, but the second to last time. And I went and I sat for 5 months in the county. And that's a haul in a county jail. 5 months is, I hear people say all the time, especially the workhouse in Franklin County, they'd rather do fucking a year in prison than sit in a county jail for 6 months. And I sat there for 5 months. I dealt with my misdemeanors. I went to court for my felonies. And when I went for sentencing, I went in front of the judge, and she told me, she said, Mr. Essig, these are your first felony charges. we're willing to give you probation. However, if you violate, I will send you to prison for the maximum amount of time possible. And I knew that if I took probation, I was going to violate and I was going to prison. Because look back at the past 5 years. I mean, nothing. I've been to jail how many? 10, 12 times. And it never clicks when I get out. And so I knew if I took probation, it was a wrap. I was going to prison for 5+ years because of the conveyance charge. So I went back to the holding cell behind the courtroom and I'm talking to my public defender. And I was like, hey, man, listen, can you get me some help? It was the first time I asked for help. And of course, it was because I was fucking threatened with prison. Things got really bad. There were consequences. And he said, all right, let me see what I can do. Goes out, talks to the prosecutor, talks to the judge, and he comes back and he says there's this special docket drug court program. And he gave me this pamphlet that had all the requirements and the things I needed to do. And he said, if you want to do this, you can. And I said, okay. So I go back to the county. They take me back to jail, and I still have that pamphlet with me. And so I'm in our tank. It's what we call it in Franklin County. It's a tank, 20, 30, 40 guys. And I'm flipping through this thing. And it's like, go to court every Thursday. See your probation officer every Tuesday. Go to 3+ recovery meetings a week. Go to see a therapist. Do intensive outpatient. I'm fucking flipping through this thing and I'm like, oh my God, there's no way I'm gonna be able to do this. Why the fuck? And at that point, people are like making fun of me. They're like, why the fuck didn't you take probation? Take the probation. And I'm sitting there like, fuck, I'm an idiot. This was not a good decision. The other piece of that was I had to do house arrest for 90 days when I got out. So I take this drug court program and I get released on house arrest. I get released on a Wednesday. I'm sitting at this house. Friday rolls around. And mind you, I've been locked up 5 months. So I'm clean, right? My tolerance doesn't exist anymore. It's like I wake up early Friday, 7:30. And the gears start turning in my head. Ooh. And I'm like, man, it's Friday. Like, you just got out. Just use once. And, and I become a mathematician too, because I'm like, okay, it's 8 a.m. If I use now, drink a fucking ton of water, maybe get one of those detox kits from a head shop, I'll be able to pass my drug test Monday. We'll be good. I didn't consider anything else. I just didn't want to go back to jail. And so I called my dude. Hey, man, you bring me a bag? Yeah. Brings me a bag of heroin. And I remember him telling me, he was like, hey, man, like, this is fire. Go easy. And I'm sitting there like, bro, you've told me that how many fucking times? And it's trash 80% of the time. So I go up to the bathroom. Nobody's home with me. Nobody's there. And I snort a line of heroin. I snort the line. I go downstairs. I get outside to smoke a cigarette. And I overdose. I fall flat on my fucking face in the lawn. The neighbors find me. They call the squad. I wake up in the ambulance, and my first thought, I look down at my ankle monitor. I'm like, fuck. I'm off my monitor. I'm going back to jail. Go to the hospital. I'm there for how many hours, whatever. I get out. I go home. Monday rolls around, and again, I take a step in the right direction. I decide to tell the truth. I also was off my monitor for so many hours, I couldn't really hide it.
There's a little bit of accountability there, yeah.
But, I decided to tell the truth. And so I go in and I tell my probation officer I overdosed over the weekend. And they arrested me, as they should. And I sat back in the county for 2 to 3 weeks. And the beautiful thing about drug court programs is they give you chances. They exist to try and help people. That's why they exist. And they send me to jail. I get out. They give me another chance. And this time I decided, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this, but I'm not going to be happy about it. Right. And I start checking their boxes. Okay. Clean drug test. Fucking see the judge. I'm doing all this shit. I stayed sober for 6 months like that. I was miserable. I did no work on myself, but I wasn't drinking and using, and my life did get better. I got a job, whatever. But because I didn't put any effort into my actual recovery, I relapsed. And the last time I had a drink or a drug was July 3rd, 2016. I remember that last drunk well, and you've probably heard this before, don't forget your last drunk. And there was a bottle of gin in the freezer, 4th of July, obviously. I was living with my sister at the time. She went out to get fireworks. I found this bottle of gin, and I remember thinking with everything in my heart and soul, I believed it. It's like, I'm going to have like 2 or 3 shots, and I'm going to have a good 4th of July. I drank the whole fucking bottle by myself. And I woke up, fucking puke on me, my girlfriend at the time standing over me. Eventually that led to some cocaine use, and I gave a couple of dirty urines for cocaine. And I was violated again and sent back to jail for the last time. That was when I started to make changes. And what that looked like for Lewis was pretty simple. I always think I have the answers, man. I'm the smartest guy in the room. I can outthink you. I can outmanipulate you. Things got better for me when I started listening to other people and taking suggestions. That's when my life changed. When I started thinking to myself, maybe the fucking judge who's seen thousands of guys just like me tells me to do X, Y, Z. Maybe it's because he knows better than I do. Wow, what a fucking idea. Someone actually is smarter than me or knows what I need. Maybe when the guy with 30 years sober says do X, Y, Z, it's because he's got 30 years sober and he knows what he's doing. And I started to take suggestions, and lo and behold, things got better. So the last time I went to jail, it was a minimum security prison. They have like cognitive behavioral classes and stuff integrated into it. And I took everything seriously, man. I did everything I was told. I talked to people in recovery. I picked their brains. I took suggestions, and my life started to get better.
How hard was it for you to get humble and actually start taking suggestions and listen to people that have been down the road already?
It was extremely difficult, man. It was the last thing I tried. Really, I had tried everything. Every solution I could think of. Okay, maybe I'll just drink beer. Okay. We'll set the heroin aside, but we'll take Xanax. I have a great idea. Let's fucking trip balls, and maybe we'll like have this divine intervention, and that'll get us clean. I mean, I tried everything, and nothing worked until I started to listen to people. So what that looked like, for instance, when guys would come in and bring recovery meetings into the correctional facility, I'd go to every single one. And not only would I go to every single one, but I'd actually listen, and I would talk to them afterwards. They would tell me to read things. I'd read it. That doesn't mean that I was like this model fucking inmate. I wasn't. I just took the things that I needed to take seriously. So I got released for the last time, January 3rd, 2017. I got out. I'm a convicted felon at this point, and I got a job at a pizza shop. And I remember being so grateful that somebody would hire me, because you got to understand, man, there were so many times, and I remember very well having this epiphany when I was in jail one day. I was sitting there, and it hit me. It hit me. I was like, oh my God, they build places like this for people like me. Like, that's why these places exist, because I'll never get it together. Some people like me have to have a place to live. I mean, that's what I really thought, bro. I was like, jails and prisons exist for me because I'll never get it together. I thought I was doomed. I thought I was going to end up in jail or prison for the rest of my fucking life, in and out. I didn't think I could get better, man. And so when I got that job, I was so fucking grateful. I made $7.25 an hour.
Nice. At
this pizza place. I worked my ass off, and eventually I went for a manager position. And I remember the district manager would not promote me because of my felonies. And that was the first like real roadblock I had, you know, after I got out. And I remember thinking like, you can't be serious. Like you can't be serious, my man. You're not going to let me manage a pizza shop because I'm a felon. It doesn't even fucking make sense. And I was like, okay, so like, this is what we're doing. Like, this is how my life's going to be. This is going to be challenging. I had a hard time finding places that would rent to me. You know, it got to the point with apartments where I'd show up to see it and I'd shake their hand and say, hey, do you rent to felons? Just to get it the fuck out of the way. Yeah, because I don't want to waste my time or your time. You know, they say no. All right, cool. Have a good day. On to the next one. There's a lot of challenges and roadblocks when you have a criminal record. It's really unfortunate, man, because, you know, there's so many talented, creative, smart people in jail and prison, and they all deserve a shot.
Yeah. What were some of the things that you did different this time in sobriety versus that initial 6 months that you had where you ended up relapsing? What were specific things that you actually did that made that difference?
Yeah. I mean, it's really simple, dude. I just took it seriously and did the things that were suggestions. So I mean, to answer your question, what that looks like, I went to recovery meetings damn near every day of the week. They told me to call people in recovery and talk to them. I did that. They told me to read certain literature. I did that. They told me to be of service to other alcoholics and other people. I did that. I never said no to anything recovery related. That's my rule. If somebody asks me to do something and it has to do with recovery, you say yes every single fucking time. You suit up and you show up. That's what you do. Because someone was there and did that for me, right? So I need to do it for the next guy. You know, my life at that time slowly started to improve. I got a car, you know, which was fucking crazy to have my own car. I finally found a place that would rent to me. It was some shithole fucking Section 8 housing fucking apartment. But you know what? It was fucking my shitty Section 8 apartment. It was mine for the first time in my life. You know, and I was working in restaurants. I remember I was working in fine dining as a waiter in 2020 when COVID happened. And, you know, I worked really hard to get to that point. You can make good money waiting tables in fine dining. And, you know, I was so grateful just to be in that position. Because, I didn't know if I was ever going to have that life that I wanted. And when COVID happened in 2020, I went into work. It was a Sunday, and I remember watching the governor close restaurants. And I was pissed because, you know, I'd worked so hard to get to that point, and something out of my fucking control took it away from me. Yeah. And I didn't know what the fuck I was going to do. I didn't know where I was going to find another job. And we talked about how I made that judge an ally, right? And I was bringing recovery meetings into the correctional facility I was locked up at. And I went to my judge and I said, hey, man, do you think they would hire me over there? And he said, I'll write you a reference letter if you want. You can apply. And so I applied to work at that correctional facility I was incarcerated at, and they fucking hired me, man. Wow. They hired me. I started out as a CO, essentially the equivalent of a CO. And I worked my way up to the unit supervisor. So I actually ran the unit I used to live on, and I managed the staff on the unit. I had an office. My fucking office was on the unit I used to live on. Again, didn't plan on going back there and working there, but I did, and it was fucking awesome, dude. It was my favorite job by far.
The irony there.
Oh, dude, I remember walking through there again for the first time as a staff member, and it was just so trippy. Like, yeah. Wow, I work here now, and I was incarcerated here. There were still staff members there from when I was locked up, and now they were my fucking peer. They were my colleague. We were equals. It was crazy, dude, but it was awesome. I got a chance to talk to and help so many guys at that job.
It's also a self-esteemable act. You're giving back to the place that, I mean, was punishing you, but also rehabilitated you back to reality and sobriety and, to get you back on track. And I bring up self-esteemable acts a lot, like giving back, and you're clearly doing that. And there's no coincidence that you are still sober.
Right.
Where are you at now? Are you still working there?
I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not. So I worked there for 2 years. And it was fantastic. I loved every minute of it. And then I got an opportunity to work in sales. I've always been a talker. I've always been a manipulator, I guess. And sales, there's some manipulation there. Let's fucking be honest. It's part of the job. Yeah. And so I went and chased the dollar. Worked in logistics sales for a while. I now work for my local news station in Columbus, actually the top news station in Columbus, doing marketing and sales. And it's so funny, man. Like, I worked at the jail I was incarcerated at. I work at the news station that once wrote an article about me when I got arrested. You know what I mean? Like, you can't make this shit up. Life is... It's so crazy. You never know what's going to happen. And we're sitting here, right? And we're talking about all this good shit in recovery, right? There were bad times too, man. There were hard. I lost my mother to an overdose in recovery, I'll never forget it. It was like 5 a.m. I looked over, my phone rang. It was my dad. And I was like, that's weird. And he called the second time. I didn't answer the first one. When he called the second time, I knew what happened. And when I lost my mom, it wasn't easy, but I understood it. I understood it because she was just like me. She couldn't stop. But that helped me, that I was able to understand why she was gone, and I knew it was okay. Like I got it. I also lost my dad a year ago to cancer.
I'm so sorry, dude.
I didn't expect to not have parents at 33 years old. But I also didn't expect to be sitting here. And those hard times, man, I'll share this with you. I thought about this last night. I haven't really talked about this at all with anybody. I have a nasty habit of stuffing shit down sometimes. I'm fine.
You and I both.
I'm fine. I'm fine. It's my favorite fucking 2 words. I'm fine. When I lost my dad, man, things got really hard. It was hard because he had been through so much with our family already, and to get dealt a fucking shitty hand, to get dealt cancer, it's just like, come on, man. Like, he doesn't deserve this shit. The silver lining in that was I got to be present. If I was out there drinking and using, he's coming second to that. When he went to the hospital, I would have had to get my shit before I went and sat with him in the hospital, So I got to be present for him when he passed away. I was in the hospital with him, even prior to him passing away, I was able to help him, as he was struggling with cancer. That was great. But I found myself in a really bad place, dude. And I'm really still experiencing that today, a year later. I still do all the things I need to do to stay sober, but it's hard, man. It's hard. It's scary knowing that it's just me. There's nobody left in this world that is required to fucking take care of me. If shit goes bad, I can't call mommy and daddy and say help. And then, that's scary. I went through a breakup during that time. I got a new job during that time. It was very challenging, man. And, yesterday, so I'm walking through the airport in Baltimore. Walking through the airport and I look over at people drinking at the bar. This doesn't happen to me often, but it happened to me yesterday. And I look over and I see the drinks and I'm like, man, that looks good. That looks good. I've got fucking 8 years and I'm having these thoughts. Second thought was, nobody will know. I can do this and nobody will know. So recovery isn't always fucking rainbows and butterflies. It's not. But it's better than what the fuck I was doing before, you know? It's worth it 100%.
It's crazy how those thoughts never go away. You know, sometimes you're in a better place. Sometimes you're, you know, more spiritually connected, and it's less and less, those temptations. But I've had moments like that as well. I appreciate your vulnerability, but that's the thing. Like, you're still vulnerable and willing to get humble, especially in front of a camera.
Yeah, man.
To help the next person.
Exactly.
Which is why you are still sober, and which is why you didn't go and join them at the bar yesterday.
Yeah. You're exactly right, man. I do this stuff for other people, but I also do it for me. And even with our podcast, like, it's so cool because a lot of our guests are the guys who were incarcerated at that fucking facility when I worked there. And I get to give them a platform to come in and share their story. We had a guest on a couple weeks ago. He texted me. He said, "Hey, man, thank you so much. Nobody ever cares about my story. Nobody ever asked me to tell it." And that was so cool. And that was a guy who was incarcerated at that facility when I worked there, and we talked all the time. And so for him to get out and me be able to work with them and help him, you know, I'm inviting these guys into my fucking place like it's nothing because they're just like me, you know? And when I worked there, it was the same thing. You're just like me. I was in your shoes. But no, man, I'm grateful for where I'm at today. Things aren't perfect, but they're better than they used to be. That's for sure, and that's what I have to remember on the bad days.
Yeah. If you could give one piece of advice to the Lewis in 2011, let's say, the listener who is in Lewis's shoes from 2011, what would it be?
God, this is such a tough question. I get asked this a lot, and I think that I would violently shake myself and tell myself to listen to other people. I would tell myself that there are people who care about you. I would tell myself that there are people who need you. And I would tell myself that there's a better way to live, you know. It doesn't have to be like this forever.
Yeah. Lewis, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Of course.
Thank you for making the trip.
Yeah, you got it.